is what you're looking at is for a starting point. So I'm not sure if everybody's is the same, but the top of my head, or the top of the head of the bird, falls on the letter G if you've gone across. I'm not sure if that's the same with everybody. So the way to look at it is when you're looking at this line here, the top of the bird's head, is gauge where it sits within that box. So it sits a little bit further than halfway up that box. Okay, so our first line is going to go around about here. Okay, again, I'm just going quite light with my pencil. And I'm going to start speeding up in a bit. So as we come down into this box, can you see that the line intersects at this point here? So you can even do almost like dot to dot. You could do a dot there that comes down to this section here. And again, as we come down to here, we can see it goes into this intersection, which is useful. Okay, but actually as we come down further, it doesn't come here. The next one lands around about this stage. So it's really important to keep your eye on this accuracy and not to start going so super fast that you end up not getting the accuracy with the drawing. So what we'll do first of all, we'll just concentrate on getting the outline of the bird done first, and then afterwards we will work on the inside. Quite often, I'm just going to say this to put it out there, I will very gently and very quickly just map out an eye or a wing to make sure I'm on track, but for now we're just going to do the outline, okay? So you just look at each box in turn. So in my case, this is 4D, so I'm looking at 4D. And I can see that 4D, just a small amount of that bird lands in 4D, like this. Just a small amount. Now, if we find it difficult to gauge what's happening within the box, a really useful thing to do is to look at the negative space, is to look at what is happening outside of the box. For whatever reason, it switches the other side of the brain over, and it just makes life a lot easier when you're drawing, when you look at negative space. It stops the left-hand side of the brain trying to name things, which actually gets in the way. So we want to engage the right-hand side of the brain. There's a really good book called Betty Edwards, Drawing on the Right-Hand Side of the Brain. And it's all about the fact that you... has anybody heard of the Betty Edwards book, Drawing on the Left-Hand Side of the Brain? Or right-hand side, sorry, Drawing on the Right-Hand Side of the Brain. I'm going to explain it because it is important to know, because we are drawing. The brain is divided into two sections, the left and the right. The left-hand side of the brain is what deals with getting us out of trouble fast. So it is the side that deals with language, communications, assessing danger, working out what's happened in the past, what's likely to happen in the future. And so it reduces everything down to symbols. So if we're drawing using the left-hand side of our brain, the chances are when we draw an eye, we will just all draw an eye very, very simply, like this. A symbol, almost like Pictionary, with lots of long eyelashes, yeah? It won't look like an eye, it won't be a beautifully rendered eye, it'll be a quick symbol as to what an eye is. The same with a house. There will be no 3D perspective. We will draw a house very much like a child would draw it. Everything will be flat and symbolic. Now, that's fine if we have to get out of trouble or we're just trying to reduce everything to symbols or language. But the problem is when we're drawing properly, we don't really want to rely on that, because the problem is it interferes. It will tell us that eyes are round. It will tell us that teeth are white, and actually they're not. What we have to do is we have to train our brain to see the shapes, the relations of one thing to another thing. So a bird's eye, for instance, you know, well, actually in this case, if we were drawing this bird's eye from memory, we'd probably just do a fairly round eye like this. But actually, if you engage the right-hand side of the brain, which I'll talk about in a minute, you will see that the bird's eye is actually a series of shapes like this, and not a round eye. So we have to disengage the left-hand side of the brain, and we have to engage the right-hand side of the brain. And the right-hand side of the brain is the creative side. So it's the side that will see abstract shapes, the relationships of one line next to another line. And the way that you switch the annoying left-hand side off because you don't want it when you're drawing, are two methods. One is to see negative space. That really helps. If you're obsessed with drawing this bird, your left hand side will get involved. So instead, look at what's happening on the outside space, because as soon as the left hand side sees stuff that can't be named, it gives up and it lets the right hand side take over. The other way of doing it is to turn your drawing upside down. When you when you turn a drawing upside down, the left-hand side gives up with actually trying to figure out any more what's happening, and it lets the right-hand side engage. So it's these tips and tricks that will really help you to start thinking of stuff as shape and tone and line, and it will, stop you, drawing stuff that isn't accurate. So, but it's a really good book, Drawing on the Right-Hand Side of the Brain, by Betty Edwards. She died a couple of years ago, but you can still get the book on eBay, £4 or £5. And it was written in the 70s, and I think she was probably thought of by some people as being, a little bit out there. But they've since gone on. People that are stroke victims that have lost certain sides of their brain have realised actually sometimes their creative side kicks in because their analytical left-hand side, their language side, has reduced somewhat. So yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. So I'm just going to continue to draw. I'll carry on explaining, but please just feel free to launch in and start drawing at the same time, because I'd like to get this drawing done within the next 20-25 minutes or so. Okay. So is everything making sense so far? Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'm just working my way down the bird and just drawing these shapes. And every now and then you might want to just check your numbers and your letters to check everything's in the right place. I tend to keep my hand as well, my finger, exactly where I want to draw on the photograph, and it helps me keep track of where I am. Okay. So when we are looking at gridding or tracing, what we're looking at are not only the physical objects within a subject's features, so we've obviously got an eye, a beak, but we're looking for the changes of tone and shape within that bird or that animal. So we're looking for the bigger shapes. And so obviously this is, all one part of the same body, but we're looking for these kind of shapes that are going on inside. As with reference to the beak, we're looking at these different shapes because tone and shape, well, they're both related anyway, but they're really, really important to get right. So first of all, we might as well get the eye dropped in, but as I say, instead of looking at it being just a circle, look at the real shape of this eye. If it makes it easier, turn it upside down, and you can even fold your picture over, and you'll start to see what an interesting shape the eye is. Okay, so that's what I'm going to start with first, is just getting the eye dropped in. Make sure it's in the right space. So you see it's actually quite a triangle going on there, and not a circle. It's a straight line on that side, and then it goes down to that triangle. And the reflected light's really important to get in, so just do an oversized section for your reflected light. And then what I'd recommend is you just work on each section at a time, just getting the drawing popped in. So up next would probably be the beak and the face, for instance. It also helps to squint a lot. When you squint, it will help you see the darker shapes, the bigger shapes. So really, I'm just mapping out some of those shapes now.
So are you doing this with the charcoal or the pencil?
Still using the pencil just to map out the shapes, yeah. Now when there's a whole series of different complex shapes, every now and then, especially if I'm doing like a tiger or something and I've got tiger stripes or I've got zebra stripes, I'll shade very gently with graphite because you don't want to do it too dark, otherwise the charcoal doesn't sit on it. I just shade some of those darker shapes just so I know which bits are light and which bits are dark, because it can get a bit confusing, especially, around here, around this bird's head. It goes from, dark, dark, light, dark. So we can get a little bit complicated. And once you've done his face, you can really move on to the wing, and then you're pretty much drawn at that stage. When you come to the wing, do the outside of the wing first, I'd recommend, and then work into the inside of the wing after. Just get your shape in first if you haven't already. If I hit a bit that I find difficult, I tend to leave it, do the surrounding stuff, and it normally just resolves itself, actually. The other bits kind of help you draw it. Don't worry if it goes a little bit wrong at this stage. When you come to apply your charcoal, you can correct any bits that are a little bit out at that stage, as long as it's roughly mapped in the right area. Okay, we're recording. So what I'm going to do is I am just really doing sketchy marks almost. I'm not worried about if a little bit of the white shows at the moment under the paper, but you can see how big I'm making that reflected light, because it's going to be easy to shrink that reflected light down, but it's not going to be easy to make it larger. So I'm giving it a big amount of reflected light. Now, even though we're going to loosen up later on during the drawing, I always try and keep my eyes pretty accurate and tight to the drawing. So nice and slow, just to get some accuracy on the eye. That's right, and just blow away any dust that's in the way. Did everybody pick up a mono eraser, these thin erasers? If it is that you've messed up a little bit and you just want to, you think, oh, I've taken that angle a little bit wrong, or, a bit wide, you can always just very gently just lift off a little bit. It's difficult to lift off these pencils totally, to be honest, but it'll help you a little bit if you want to correct any mistakes. It's important to look at the beak because can you see that the beak is a multitude of different tones? It's not just black. So obviously when you press down hard on this pencil, you're going to get dark. When you press light, you're going to get lighter shades. Now bearing in mind, we're going to blend all this in. So we're really just trying to put tone down at the moment. We're just trying to get this compressed charcoal onto our paper in the right place. That's all we're worried about at the moment. We can do faffing about and fiddly stuff afterwards. So I'm just going to very gently go in here with the first shape that I can see on that beak, just cutting round here. Now I'm pressing harder here because I want those bits to be darker. I want this bit to be quite dark and I want this bit to be dark, so I'm pressing quite hard there. But for the rest of it, I'm going to go in really light with my pencil. And here, I'm going to go in much lighter. Now, just from experience, I know that when I start rubbing that in with my finger, that I'll end up smudging some tones into here, so I won't need to put tone there because my finger will get me the tone when I come to smudging. So you're really just looking at the very, very dark bits and the darker mid-tones. So just something like that. Okay, so I tend to put my finger where I'm going to be working, and that just helps me keep track. Now, instead of doing solid lines, I'm deliberately going to go in the direction that I can see the feathers going. I'm not after lots of accuracy, but I just know it's going to be easier when I tend to lift and blend that at least everything's going in the right direction. So as I go through, I'm doing this kind of just very light marks. If I can see that it goes lighter, I'm releasing my pressure. And if I see it goes darker, I'm increasing my pressure. I'm cutting round. See these light passages of tone that come through? I'm going to completely avoid them because the dirt on my finger in a bit is going to give me those lightish tones. So even when I'm going around the edge, I'm just going to say feather it out, excuse the pun, but so I'm always looking at the tones. I'm not making assumptions that everything is the same tone. I'm going a little bit lighter here. I'm going to leave this because I'm going to introduce a new tool in a minute. So again, anywhere that I can see really dark, I'm putting in the darks. And you'll tend to find that things get quite scruffy in nature, so you don't want to go too much always in the one direction. Try and look for crisscrosses and mismatches, you know. It will make it look far more natural. Again, I'm going to give this section here a wide berth, like we did with the eye. And here I'm just going to cut in backwards there and right up to the eye. So I really am just establishing my darkest darks. This is confusing, it's a little bit complicated. So if I get confused, what I tend to do is dodge an area, cut round it, and then kind of rejoin when I know when I kind of understand what's happening. Again, just lighter here. Just lighter here. And then here, there's only a few really dark areas here. There's a little bit here. There's a weird shape that goes on there. There's one there. Some there, and then when it comes to that, like, I don't know what you'd call them, if they're eyelids or something, I'm not sure, but when it comes to that, should find out really, when it comes to that circle around the eye, I'm almost doing like a series of dots and dashes really, so I want it to be quite subtle. Now the tool that I'm going to introduce now is going to be this willow stick. I'm going to use the willow stick because with the willow stick, you'll see on this piece of paper here, however dark you go, as soon as you smudge, it lightens almost to nothing. Whereas with the charcoal pencil, if you go like this, you'll find it becomes, you know, pretty dark. That's why I use the two. So we're now going to use the Willow stick here, because that will give me a really nice mid-tone when I come to blend the two. And I've just noticed I've missed out a little, almost like a wishbone shape under the eye. Again, dots and dashes. What you don't want to do are outlines like this and then start filling them in, because you'll find that they will fix that shape. It'll be really difficult to cut into it and do things with it. So keep your movements quite fluid. So let's get this wishbone shape done. And again, there's some little lines that go around the eye. And there's a little bit of dark here. And just under that beak, you'll see some little darks there. And then just back onto this charcoal. And you can go quite scruffy here. And again, I'm just I'm squinting to see the tones, and I can see actually I can extend my bit of dark right to that point. It goes down to a V. There's a few little dark lines there. And then again, now this is very much the ugly duckling stage of a drawing. It's just a mishmash. All you're doing is you are effectively, similar to when you're painting in oils, you're blocking in tone. You're not getting any texture in, you're just blocking in the tones and seeing shape. I've nearly finished this demonstration. So let's do this bit here. Just double checking. And again, I'm squinting to check I've got my dark tones in. Okay, so just want to quickly summarise what I've done. Where the tone is really dark, I've gone in dark with my pencil. Where it's more of a mid-tone, so if you've got, say, a tonal scale of 1 to 10, where it's kind of quite light, saying our lightest of 1s and 2s, where it's kind of going to about a 3, I've used the Willow. Where it's almost a 2 or a 1, I've left it completely blank, because I know the dirt on my finger will push that into a very light tone for me. Okay then. So my apologies that that bit didn't record, but I'm just going to recap on this wing here. So what I've done is I first of all put these sections in with my charcoal pencil, these shapes and this shape here, this shape here, and then all these kind of teardroppy shapes. I made sure that I left this section here light, these sections light, and then I used the side of my pencil just to very gently just shade in the other tones. On these lines here, these ones that come down here, I did it fairly fast and I wasn't particularly accurate. I just wanted to get some shapes in. Okay. We may as well get the tail done whilst we're down here. I'm going to turn page round here. You can see that it's quite an ugly duckling. You know, there's no, it's just a load of shapes at the moment, and that's quite normal. So when it comes to the tail, again, I'm looking for the darkest tones. Excuse me. And I'm going to just drop those dark tones in. And I'm checking my shapes here, because I did this bit quite fast and I probably didn't concentrate as much as I should have done. So I'm just checking my shapes as I go. And just dropping in, and so I'm using my dark charcoal pencil for that. I'm also adding a little bit of dark just up here, but not too much. Don't want to add. I don't find the feet or the tail feathers that interesting, so I tend to just let them dissipate. Now there isn't that much tone along the rest of the tail, so we'll just use probably what's just on our fingers when we come to smudge, but we just want to get the dark tones established. Okay. So the next bit of dark, if we're just working logically through the piece, is, can you see there's that bit of dark just above his leg, hip? I don't know what it is, but there's this shape of dark just above his leg. Now you can draw this with some accuracy. It's like it's a weird shape. So we can colour that in with the dark pencil while we're at it. And it's going to start looking a bit disjointed at the moment because we're just doing the real darks here. And again, you can feather that in as you go towards the body. You might notice as well, as you move up the piece gently, that there's some other little dark lines, and I think a couple of you have started drawing those, which is great because it is actually the process that I would do normally, is to put all my darks in first. So there might be the odd little bit of dark that you want to just pop in. I don't want you to worry about the body just now. We're going to do the body in a bit. Okay, it's quite quick and easy to do the body, that's why I'm not too worried about it. In terms of the legs, really, it's just a little bit of detail at this stage. I would just do something like a lost and found line. So not a big solid line. You don't want to come down like this. With a lost and found line, really just very sketchy, so that it's not too, solid and in your face. They're not really the most beautiful part of a bird, so I don't tend to draw that much attention to them. And remember that little bit of drop shadow just under the foot. We are going to do the branch a little bit later, but that bit of drop shadow is important, just to ground it. And you might want to add just a little bit of shadow on the other side of the leg as well. I'm using the side of my charcoal pencil to do that, going in lots of different directions just to start me off. We'll come back to the branch a bit later, right towards the end actually. Okay. Go. Sorry, it's just some marks I've missed off here. Just quickly get them on. Okay. Right, so when it comes to the breast of the bird, again, I'm going to turn it around this way because that will just stop me having to smudge my work. Let's get it into a comfortable position. So the darkest section we can see, again, if you squint, is down here and down here. Now, it's unlikely, once we start smudging, that if we use this one, this Willow, that it's going to be dark enough for what we need. So let's start with the darkest darks first. Actually, I'll tell you what, I am going to turn it that way around, but I'm going to protect my work just with a piece of paper. Just check you can see it. Okay. So first of all, you see that kind of darker passage of darker passage of light down the body. Let's get that sketched in, because that's going to be our darkest dark. But it's not as dark as the eye. So we're not going to press as hard as we did for the eyeball. So everything's relative when you're working out tone. Double check against other tones.
you using the pencil?
Yes, I'm using a pencil and I'm using it on its side. If you need to flatten it out a bit, just get a piece of paper like this and just scrap paper and just flatten it out a little bit so you haven't got lots of scratchy marks, because we're going to want to blunt these in a bit. As I go towards the edge, that is the time where I'm going to swap over to the willow. I won't do it yet because I want to show you a technique. So I haven't gone quite to the edge. So I'm keeping my movements really fluid and loose. The only rule I've got in the back of my head is I'm going in the direction of the feathers. But all I'm trying to do is just get the tone down. I'm going to go back over, and if I see darker areas, I'm going to darken them. It actually joins up to the head as well. So I'm not going too dark, I'm not really pressing heavily. Okay. You noticed I haven't gone into the whites yet. I've left those as they are. I haven't gone into these sections yet. So when you look at the photograph, we really want this to tail off a little bit lighter, and we want to get some lighter sections going into here. We still got this very big shape, but there are some bits of tone that go into that. Again, we're only looking for tone at the moment. You can bring in the feathery bits afterwards. Now, if we were to make these really dark, we will really struggle to lift that off with the razors. So for that reason, we're going to use the charcoal, the lighter charcoal, the willow or vine. Break it off a small amount, this kind of size, off your vine, and on a flat piece of paper, just flatten the edge, flatten the sides, so you end up with a fairly flat section, like that. Okay. You might even need to make your stick even smaller, actually. See how you get on. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pop some tone on here. If you like, I'll do the demonstration first. So all I'm doing is I'm just gently adding some tone, nice and light, or nice and lightly. I can see there's a passage of tone that goes in there, some that will go in there, and there's some that will go in there. Because I know that I'm going to be able to lift that and create shapes. I'm just going to add a little bit of tone onto the rest of it just to unify it. But I've been very careful to leave these big white spaces. I've just lost a bit of white, so I'm just going to regain it back with my mono eraser. Any bits of charcoal on your paper, just try and keep your work tidy, because it very quickly ends up a mess if you're not careful. So we're going to start bringing this all together. The tools that you're going to need are your hands. You're going to need a standard eraser. You're going to need your mono eraser. So these are by Tombow, Mono Zero. You can get them from Amazon. They're about £4 or £5. And they've got these really handy refills in them.
What's the second?
Yeah, Mono Eraser by Tombow. Invaluable tool. I discovered them maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. Never looked back. And you will probably end up using this again as well to add marks towards the end. So what we're going to do is we are going to start with the eye and the face. Oh, sorry, the other tool you're going to need as well is your blending tool, your stump, if you haven't used it already. Now the blending stump is really useful at this stage because it helps us blend those areas that might have paper showing through but that our fingers are too fat to get into. And I'm going to protect my work with a bit of paper. I'm just going to grab some clean. Is everybody right with paper or is everybody need some clean? Yes, everybody's got a blender, haven't they? And everybody's got a razor. What I'll do is I'll start the recording again so that I can erase that little bit so you haven't got it all. Perhaps this section and you can lean on it without getting everything dirty. What I'm doing here is I'm going to use the tip of my blender just to tidy that up and even tighten up the reflected light. You can see how easy it is to make it a bit smaller. So I've just made that a little bit smaller, that reflected light. And the bits of charcoal on the end of the blender will help you get, you know, even more subtle tones in there as well. Because if the reflected light is too big in the eye, it's just going to look really starey. We don't want that. Don't want a starey bird. Then you can use your blender to do these tighter areas, these smaller areas on the beak. And then just gently bring out some of those tones. We're going to use our fingers in a minute, but this just helps on those tighter areas. And just copy the shapes that you can see on the photograph. And if you've missed bits out, like I just have, that's what the rest of the tools are for. Just to add, you know, wait, to add marks as well, actually, a little bit later, but help you fix things. And I'm going to correct the shape of my beak because mine wasn't, this shape wasn't arched enough. Okay. Now, if there are areas, so if you look at this beak, for instance, that I'm working on, if there are areas that you think, oh gosh, that's just too dark, I've gone in too dark on that beak, and everybody's will be different, you can just use your mono eraser perhaps, just to lift it a little bit. If there's a couple of areas where you think I've lost a passage of light, you can just gently rub that over if you want to regain some of your lights. This is probably the one of the fussiest areas to work on is in the face because everything's so small. Once you've done that, if you look at the eye, can you see around the eye, there's that circle around the outside of the eye. All that you need to do is apply your blending tool to that area, and just the bit of charcoal that's on the end of your tool will just darken some of those areas down. And again, if that's too bright and white, it's going to make your bird look really starey. Want some light around the eye, but not too much. Okay. Now that's pretty much it at the moment for using the blending tool. We're going to be using our fingers now to blend in the rest of the head. So I tend to use my ring finger on my right hand side. I seem to have more control that way, but by all means, if you prefer to use your index finger or whatever suits you. And I tend to use it on my side. I don't use the tip of my finger, I use the side of my finger for for blending. Now all we're going to concentrate on at this stage is this top bit of the head. So nothing beyond there, okay? So what I'll do first, if you like, I'll do the demo first, and if you want to do it afterwards, great. So I am just blending all this. I'm going in the direction of the feathers. I'm not too worried if it knocks out some of my whites, because I know that it's just a little bit of tone and I can get that back in a bit. I'm just going to soften it all. So you can see by using our tools on their side, it's meant that when it comes to softening, you can get a really nice, almost like blank canvas of tone. Whereas if you've been using it scratchy style or leaving gaps, I was going to say gaps in your work, you won't get that smoothness. Because now once you've got that smoothness, you can start working into that space and getting your textures. And the way I'm going to get my texture, I'm going to use the mono eraser initially. So I'm just going to show you how I'm going to use it. I kind of flick out with it, really fast marks. Try and get your movements like moving nice and fast, not tighten up. Enjoy the process. You know, it's really important to enjoy it. So kind of flick outwards. Remember that nature is random. Now, similar to when we use the brush, if the lighter you want the marks to be, the heavier you're going to rub. If you've missed a bit of tone, quite often just the dirt on your finger is enough to retrieve it. Now a nice thing you can do with the mono eraser, not the mono eraser, sorry, but with the blending stump, is with the residual charcoal that's on the end, you can even just add, you know, some little bits of fluff as you come around the edges perhaps. You know, start imagining stuff and just making it a little bit more windswept perhaps. And there's nothing stopping you adding some dark marks, but very, very gently with your pencil. If you think, oh, I need a few darks in there. Remember to squint. Squinting will really help you see those shapes and those tones. So what will happen at this stage, you'll end up using all the tools on your desk to start creating marks and interest in your piece. It's the bit that you kind of want to start doing right at the beginning, but it's best to do it at this stage. It'll just make your piece look far more coherent and joined up. If your mono eraser is a little bit ineffective, it can be that there's just too much of it hanging out the end. So just make sure it's just a little smidgen of it hanging out the end. That makes it more impactful. When it comes to mark making, try and use your tools in slightly different ways. Hold your charcoal pencils in different ways. Instead of holding them at the point like that, hold them overhand, and it'll give you a different way of using your tools, and you'll end up getting some interesting marks that way. Scribbly marks, quite nice. Makes it look more interesting. This is the part of the process I really love because, I don't know, it starts to come together then. You start to get the textures. It's quite addictive.
So have you got any workshops going on at the moment?
Yes, we've got, I've got one spot left on no, 2 spots left, sorry, on a 5-day bird course that's running, I should know the date, I think it's March or April, it's on my website. And then I've got a couple of spots left on my charcoal course, which runs in February, where you get to draw any animal of your choice. It's over 2 days, and we do A3 size. And then the other workshop, I've got a couple of spots in Italy, and then Lake District in the winter, in November. We're doing charcoal on the Friday for those that want to do that, and then we're doing 3 chickens in a watercolour on the Saturday and Sunday. So yes, so the birds and the charcoal are at Arley. That's this spring, winter spring, and then the Lake Districts are the other ones in the November. Yeah. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move down the bird. So I'm just going to add a little bit of light. Mine's a little bit dark in areas, so I tell you what, that's the other thing that's worth doing, you know, is actually having a little break every now and then from your work, because you come back and you go, oh, okay, I didn't notice that. So we're going to do the body now, because it's just the next thing that we can see. Right. Again, I'm going to use my finger, and I'm going to start blending these shapes. I've got one eye closed because I'm squinting, well, both, one eye closed. I'm squinting because I want to make sure that I don't inadvertently go into my whites. Whilst I've got my finger dirty, I might as well get this wing area blended in a little bit as well. Again, just try and retain these whiter areas for working on in a bit. A couple of shapes. No, I'll blend those in there actually. The harder you blend, the darker some of these shapes are going to go. Now, we're going to introduce you to another tool now, which is quite nice to use, and that's just this standard eraser. So with an eraser, you'll get some really nice shapes. You'll find that I chop them into different shapes, mostly blocks, to be honest. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to literally, you can either use it on its side to get a line like that, or you can use it flat to get shapes like that. And all you want to do is get your fluffiness by just almost like running it down, but try not to be too regular with your shapes. Try and get some movement in there and some energy. It's one of those things you could play with this for ages. You might end up losing some of your tone, in which case, as normal, you'll need to go back in with your other tools and put your tone back in if you end up losing too much of your tone. Again, the harder you press, the lighter it's going to go. In other words, the more impactful your tool's going to be, the harder you press. If you find that there's too many lines, like mine's looking too busy now, then just blunt them out with your finger. If you want to add any tiny details, that's when you'd go in with your mono eraser. You end up getting these little dots if you're not careful. If there's any grid marks as well inside your bird, it's a good time to start getting rid of them. I will come back in at some stage and add, at this stage actually, and add some shadows. Again, I'm just going to keep my pencil, I'm using the darker of my pencil actually, the charcoal pencil. And I'm just going to add a few more shadows to some of those areas with a little bit more texture. And it's a good time also to get the tone on the tail, so you can smudge that, those darks on the tail. It's up to you how you treat the tail. I tend to just dissipate it out, to be honest.